Imagine a 21st century where two Vietnamese nations face each other across a heavily fortified border. In the north, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, a stalwart communist state. In the south, the Republic of Vietnam, a hyper-capitalist economic powerhouse, a tiger rivaling South Korea or Taiwan. This lasting division, a stark geopolitical reality, averted the decades of brutal conflict that defined our history. Following the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, the Geneva Accords temporarily partitioned Vietnam at the 17th parallel. This alternate reality hinges on a single critical moment: the planned 1956 reunification elections mandated by the Geneva Accords. Now, let us turn the page of established history and explore what might have been. The historical context is one of fragile peace. Following the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, the Geneva Accords temporarily partitioned Vietnam at the 17th parallel, pending a nationwide election in 1956 to reunify the country. In Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh's government was overwhelmingly popular and expected a landslide victory. In the south, the US-backed regime of Ngo Dinh Diem was unstable, corrupt, and acutely aware of its electoral weakness. Historically, Diem refused to hold the elections, sparking the insurgency that would escalate into global conflict. Here, we posit our point of divergence. Instead of the faltering Diem government, a swift, US-endorsed military coup in late 1955 installs a ruthlessly efficient, authoritarian junta. This new leadership, learning the hard lessons of nation-building from other Cold War theaters, immediately implements a sweeping and popular land reform program, dismantles organized crime, and co-opts powerful religious sects rather than alienating them. Through a combination of economic development and brutal suppression, it crushes the nascent Southern insurgency before it can metastasize. The 1956 election deadline passes not with growing conflict, but with a chilling stability. The 17th parallel begins to harden from a temporary line on a map into a permanent ideological and military frontier. With the prospect of reunification extinguished, two radically different Vietnamese states begin to crystallize, each a proxy and a protege of a superpower patron. When we analyze their divergent paths, we are essentially examining two competing models of Cold War nation-building transplanted into Southeast Asia. In the north, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam solidifies its identity as a bastion of orthodox Marxism-Leninism. Backed by the Soviet Union and initially China, Hanoi pursues a classic Stalinist economic model. Resources are funneled into heavy industry steel plants, coal mines, and chemical factories, at the expense of agriculture and consumer goods. Collectivization is brutally enforced in the countryside. The political landscape, without the unifying crusade for the South, becomes more insular and focused on ideological purity, mirroring the trajectory of states like East Germany. The People's Army of Vietnam, PAVN, deprived of its historical mission, evolves away from a revolutionary guerrilla force into a conventional Soviet-style army. Its divisions would be equipped with T-55 tanks and MiG-21 fighters. Its doctrine reoriented entirely toward a static, defense-in-depth strategy to protect the homeland. Its purpose is no longer liberation, but the preservation of the socialist state north of the 17th parallel. Meanwhile, the South undergoes a stunning transformation. The new junta, legitimized by its anti-communist victories and underwritten by vast sums of American capital, becomes a quintessential developmental state. Washington's geopolitical strategy demands a viable, prosperous southern bastion, and it invests accordingly. State-directed capitalism flourishes. With U.S. guidance, the government nurtures the growth of massive industrial conglomerates, focusing on export-oriented manufacturing. Saigon explodes into a dynamic commercial hub, a stark, glittering contrast to the austerity of Hanoi. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam, ARVN, is forged into a professional, technologically superior fighting force. Equipped with American M48 Patton tanks and F-4 Phantom II jets, and boasting high morale from its successful consolidation of the state. This ARVN is a formidable conventional deterrent. Here, we see the creation not of a puppet state, but of a genuine regional power. Its national identity forged in opposition to the North and defined by its fierce anti-communism and economic success. The political and economic schism between the two Vietnams inevitably manifests itself on the ground. The 17th parallel, once an administrative line, is physically transformed into one of the most militarized and hostile borders in the world. A Southeast Asian Fulda Gap. This section deconstructs the immense logistical undertaking and the strategic doctrines that define this long, cold peace. The demilitarized zone, or DMZ, becomes a misnomer. On the northern side, the PAVN, applying Soviet engineering principles, constructs a formidable, multi-layered defensive belt. We are talking extensive minefields, anti-tank ditches, concrete bunkers, and pre-sighted artillery positions, all designed to halt a mechanized assault from the south. The strategic geography of the region, particularly the narrow coastal plain and the rugged Annamite Mountains, is leveraged to create natural choke points. For Hanoi, the strategy is wholly defensive, predicated on making any southern incursion so costly in blood and treasure as to be politically untenable for Saigon and its American backers. This is a fortress state mentality, where the entire nation's military posture is oriented toward the singular goal of protecting the border. In the south, the ARVN, advised by American military engineers, adopts a doctrine of forward defense, mirroring NATO's posture in West Germany. This strategy is technologically intensive. A string of heavily fortified fire bases is constructed just south of the DMZ. Equipped with long-range artillery, radar installations, and helicopter air cavalry units ready for rapid response. Sophisticated electronic surveillance systems, early ancestors of the McNamara line from our timeline, are deployed to detect any northern infiltration. The U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet maintains a constant, powerful presence in the South China Sea, providing a strategic backstop and ensuring maritime superiority. When we analyze the logistics, the sheer scale of the American commitment becomes clear. Ports like Da Nang and Cam Ranh Bay are expanded into massive logistical hubs, capable of sustaining the high operational tempo of the Southern military machine. Unlike the fluid, borderless war of our history, this conflict becomes a static, high-stakes standoff, a daily chess match of patrols, surveillance, and shows of force along a fixed, unbreachable line. The long-term consequences of this permanent division radiate through the decades, fundamentally reshaping the geopolitical architecture of Southeast Asia. By the 21st century, the world is not dealing with one Vietnam, but two, and their fractured legacy defines the region. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, would be a house divided against itself. The prosperous U.S.-aligned Republic of Vietnam in the south would likely be an early and influential member, forming a strong capitalist bloc with Thailand, Singapore, and the Philippines. The socialist north would remain isolated, a client of a collapsing Soviet Union, perhaps only seeking entry into ASEAN in the late 1990s as an economic pariah. The organization's core principle of consensus would be perpetually strained by this internal ideological fault line. The strategic calculus of regional powers would also be transformed. The Sino-Vietnamese War of 1979, triggered in our timeline by Vietnam's invasion of Cambodia, never happens. North Vietnam, a much weaker state without the resources of the South, remains a dependent ally of Moscow. China's primary regional concern is not a powerful, unified Vietnam on its border, but the American-backed economic and military power of South Vietnam. This creates a complex triangular diplomacy between Beijing, Hanoi, and Saigon. The fate of Cambodia is also tragically altered. Without the 1979 Vietnamese invasion that toppled the Khmer Rouge, Pol Pot's genocidal regime might have persisted for years longer, leading to an even greater human catastrophe. Culturally, the schism becomes absolute. Two distinct Vietnamese identities, forged over 70 years of separation, would emerge. The South, deeply integrated into the global economy, would be culturally westernized, its cities vibrant hubs of international commerce. The North would be more insular, traditional, and defined by socialist ideology. The very idea of one Vietnam would seem as abstract and distant to a new generation as the concept of a unified Korea does today, a painful legacy of a history decisively broken. This exploration of a divided Vietnam underscores the profound contingency of history. A single divergence, the replacement of a flawed regime with a ruthlessly effective one, averts a devastating war but creates a permanent scar across a nation's soul. It reminds us that peace can come at the cost of unity, and stability can be the product of a brutal but successful exercise in statecraft. The survival of South Vietnam hinged on achieving popular legitimacy beyond military force. What specific economic or social policies could have won the hearts and minds of the Southern, where our timeline's government so tragically failed? Share your analysis in the comments below.